So, are we finally gonna find your Necronomicon? The sound of Rick's voice and the obviously fake joy set his teeth on edge. Kevin had to massage the bridge of his nose to keep his temper in check, then shook his head. It's not a Necronomicon, Rick. There are like 5 of those, and all they do is summon a few spirits. If you have a few million, I can get you one of those by the end of the week. What we're looking for is far more obscure. The guy next to him was shaking his head in a disapproving manner. I know. Then, let's see if your Marty whatever really is as great as you say. Kevin let out an exasperated sigh. If he didn't need the money and other support, he would have kicked Rick out of his expedition long ago. Martyr Maleficarum, it's called. Please don't joke around with those names. It's incredibly dangerous. He could feel the other guy rolling his eyes, but they both kept their mouths shut. This expedition was Kevin's magnum opus, his life's work, at least up to that point. He had taken an interest in strange books even as a child, and his obsession had only grown over the years. While studying history in university, his main focus had been on old and forgotten texts. The Voynich manuscript, for example. A beautiful text of unknown origin in a language no one had yet managed to decipher. Or the Malleus Maleficarum, the witch's hammer, as it was called. Written by a German inquisitor in the 15th century to, as most people believed now, justify the witch trials. The deeper he delved, the more obsessed he became. He had found credible letters dating back from that time, telling of the true horror those men and women inflicted on the population. Sorcery and witchcraft, sickness, starvation, and death. They seemed to always appear with each other. And then, a few years after he had gotten his hand on a modern edition of the book, Kevin had found his true Holy Grail. Another version. This one, not the Hexenhammer written by Inquisitor Kramer, but by someone else. Someone on the opposite side. The Martyr Maleficarum, the martyr of witches. The witch's hammer told you how to find and punish a witch. The martyr told them how to hide from you and how to take revenge. Only once, someone from the church had managed to catch a glimpse of the original book, but many of the pages had been copied by hand and distributed around the covens. It practically was a war between two sides, but in the end, the martyr of witches disappeared, and with it, the church managed to gain the upper hand. Kevin was under no illusion that either side had the best interest of people at heart. All of it had been just another struggle for power. But that book, The Martyr, still existed to this day. He was sure of that. While the copied pages had been destroyed, he had found traces of things written in the book getting published into the mid-18th century. And now, with Rick's money, he thought he had finally found the clue. It had taken him years to get his hands on the diary of a certain Grand Inquisitor who had catalogued the appearances of copied pages through the centuries. The last bunch of documents had come from a monastery not far from the place he was standing right now. Of course, the church had tortured and killed all the monks around here, but had never found the true culprit who had written down those heretical words. That was until almost a century later, when the abbot of the monastery had given a confession on his deathbed. He had protected one of the monks, not out of a sense of love or duty, but to save his status. As long as the church hadn't found the true culprit, they couldn't completely destroy the monastery, and the abbot had made damn sure they would never find him. After putting him into a remote shack under the pretense of keeping him safe, they blew up part of an old mine further up the mountain and watched as the mudslide buried both the monk and the book, never to be found again. Kevin smiled to himself. It would have been almost impossible to find something here back then. Clearing a whole mountainside after a landslide must have seemed like an insurmountable task. But today, things were different. Today, there were ways and means to locate it. With Rick's money, they had carted out 3 machines capable of ground-permeating scans, and had spent the last 6 days going up and down the slopes here. And yesterday, they had found it. An empty space deep down below, shaped like a perfect half-sphere. Something that could never occur naturally. Kevin could feel his stomach cramping up at the thought alone. This was it, he told himself. Soon, he would finally hold it in his hands.
Are the workers all right?
He heard Rick asking from beside him, and immediately nodded his head.
Kinda feels like one of those British expeditions in Egypt, right?
Not a very apt comparison, Kevin thought, but kept it to himself.
I still don't get why we couldn't bring a backhoe. Digging this stuff out with shovels will take ages.
Kevin was massaging the bridge of his nose again. He knew that Rick was just trying to make small talk, but those useless comments still got on his nerves. He had told him again and again why they couldn't use heavy machinery out here. None of the roads in the area would be able to withstand the weight, which would mean they'd get stuck time after time while trying to drive out to this place. And the ground may have settled long ago, but that didn't mean it couldn't start sliding again, which probably wouldn't do anything to the book, but it would definitely put them and their workers in danger.
We'll use our local helpers, just like the Brits,
Kevin told him while smiling softly.
And if you want to, I'm sure we can get you one of those hats they used to wear, so you feel the part even more.
He could see the smile on Rick's face widening. Kevin scolded himself in his mind. It was important to keep his partner in good spirits. He had told himself that over and over again, yet the stress of the job and the excitement of it all had made him far too tense and short-tempered. Right now, he was using Rick's money, and the guy had never said no to him even once during the past year. Someone else might have already kicked him off the expedition for the way he talked back or even shut down the operation. But not Rick. If feeling like an explorer was something he wanted, he should definitely lean into it as well.
It's kinda like one of those expeditions back then. Only instead of sand and sun, we have rain and woods.
He acquiesced, and could see the man next to him starting to smile.
It might take him longer, digging down to the space we found, but at least we'll get there safely. Pretty much all of those explorers thought of their local helpers as lesser, and I don't want to emulate them in that way. Do you? Rick's smile vanished, and he shook his head. A bit like a petulant child, Kevin thought, but kept his mouth shut. This book is plenty dangerous on its own. The last thing we need is an accident before we even get to it. Otherwise, we might really have to dig it up ourselves, and that's not something either of us wants. Right? They both were grinning at the thought. It would probably take them a week to dig to the place they had to reach if just the two of them worked without pause. And they both knew they'd give up after about an hour.
We could go and check on them. What do you think?
Kevin asked him and got a nod in response. Rick started walking first, and Kevin followed him out of the tall tent they had put up in one of the clearings. He really was thankful for Rick, and not just for the money and all the bureaucratic bullshit he had taken care of. Not once had this guy made fun of him or his ambitions or even spoken a single negative word. After all of this was over, after he could finally relax, he would definitely make it up to him somehow. He followed close behind as they walked through the strangely calm woods and toward the sound of people working in the rising sun. The cold and fresh air surrounding them was heating up quickly, and soon the workers here would start taking breaks to cool off. Kevin heard a young voice laughing up ahead, and then a couple of others joining in. It had been Rick's job to get some locals to dig here, and he had, once more, over-delivered. Instead of 3 or 4 guys with questionable skills, his benefactor had contacted a company and had gotten a dozen experienced people who seemed completely fascinated with him and the job. He had seen them talking to Rick, and it was so different from the way they treated him. Where they nodded at him curtly, even if he tried speaking their language, their eyes almost started glowing once they saw Rick coming. And it wasn't just because of the money either. Something about his partner drew people to him. It didn't matter if he spoke their language or knew about their culture. The men and women of the places they had visited had always flocked to him, joked with him, and even propositioned him. Kevin felt a twinge of jealousy. How easy life had been for Rick. A trust fund baby with natural charm. He shook his head. This wasn't the time to think about that. They should reach their target soon, and he had to make sure no one else touched the book but himself. That was of paramount importance. The laughter got louder as they finally reached a cutout clearing on the slope, and the people saw Rick. Half the workers stopped and came toward them, still laughing and joking as they swarmed around. Kevin kept a step back and watched the group. Something about this still bothered him to his core. This friendliness. He didn't like it. Yet, they all seemed so at ease with each other. Instead of joining in, he turned and walked toward the foreman, who stood off to the side while smoking one of his cigarettes. Their talks were short, to the point, and far more to Kevin's liking. While other people joked around, he worked on the problem. He'd always liked to tell himself, even though right now he, for the first time, had to admit that he just didn't fit in with the normal people.
3 hours.
The man told him in a thick accent, and Kevin felt a bit taken aback.
Soft ground. Easy work. 3 hours.
The man repeated with a smile, and another drag of his cigarette. Far quicker than they had imagined at first. Kevin had pictured that the earth down there would be far more complicated to get through than up above, but the man still smiled at him with a strange expression in his eyes.
Easy job. Very, Good work. He laughed again and pulled out the packet of cigarettes, offering one to him this time. Kevin shook his head while smiling. This felt wrong. Could it really be that easy? Hardly more than a day's work to get to one of the most sought-after artifacts from the Middle Ages? He doubted it, but gave the man a nod and turned around. The people surrounding Rick were still in great spirits, laughing and joking with each other until the foreman behind Kevin whistled, and suddenly the crowd dispersed. He could see his friend and benefactor still smiling until the people turned around, then looked over with a rather solemn expression in his eyes. Great people. I'm almost going to be sad once we leave this behind, you know. Kevin smiled. According to the guy in charge, 3 more hours. They are far, far quicker than I had anticipated. Looks like we might be able to break camp by nightfall, if you want. He could see the man furrowing his brow, then shake his head. Maybe we should let the guys enjoy this evening and head back tomorrow morning. If that's okay. Kevin nodded in response. He didn't care either way. As long as he got the book, he could start studying it wherever. It wasn't like those normal old manuscripts that needed to be kept in some artificial environment to stop them from falling apart. This book, if it was the real deal, wouldn't even catch on fire if you threw it into a volcano. As long as he had his own tent and wouldn't get disturbed, he would be happy. Do you want to wait here? The man asked, and again Kevin nodded. There was nowhere else he'd rather be. As soon as they hit the wall of that half-sphere, they would shoot him out of the hole, and he would take over. Rick pointed at 2 rickety camping chairs the crew had already put up for them, and Kevin walked over to one and sat down. He could feel his mind wandering. The Martyr Maleficarum. What a find! Officially, the book would belong to Rick. Well, the shell company he was running, to be exact, but he had given his word that Kevin would be the only one to study it at first. He could write a whole series of books about it, get published everywhere, and become something akin to a rock star overnight. People would finally know his name and the lengths he had gone through to get it. It might also shed some light on the time. Maybe the church would try to silence him. A cold grin came over his lips. They could try, but the truth always found a way to the surface. He could see Rick already dozing off next to him and concentrated on what was happening in front again. People were descending and ascending from the 2 ladders in the hole, carrying buckets of soft earth while the sound of shovels digging up dirt filled the whole clearing. Just a bit more, he told himself. He continued watching. More and more dirt got thrown out onto the side. Those people really did take their job seriously. As much as they laughed and joked around, he never caught a single glimpse of anyone slacking off. No wonder Rick wanted to keep them. Kevin himself knew enough stories about crews fucking around and destroying such sites through accidents, or even worse, blowing themselves up and the people paying for the expedition. If only... A shout rang out from the hole, and suddenly all the laughing stopped. Kevin was on his feet before the last echo could come back to him, and saw the foreman running in his direction already. We found it, the man with the heavy accent shouted out of breath. Just a bit more, then we climb in. Shut it down. It was Rick, already standing beside him, crying out. Kevin felt a rush of adrenaline as he heard those words. Yes, that was exactly what they had talked about. Those last few buckets of dirt
could be filled by him. He wanted it, needed it. The foreman looked at them and shrugged his shoulders, then cried out in a language Kevin couldn't fully understand. And suddenly, the people started coming out of the hole. Most of them were still smiling, and only a few seemed disappointed. Kevin didn't care. This could get dangerous, he told himself in his mind, but didn't even bother to voice this thought. Rick had already told them, and they would do what he said. Passing by the workers heading out, he grabbed hold of a shovel that was easily relinquished. "I'm going in," he said, to Rick, but also himself. His life's magnum opus. He could feel himself shaking slightly, tremors running from his fingers into his shoulders. This would be the first chapter of his autobiography. A grand entrance. People were looking at him, and one of the workers put a helmet with a built-in headlamp on his head as he advanced on the hole. "Just wait for me," he mumbled. The ladders were leading far deeper into the ground than he had imagined. He looked back one last time as the tip of his boot touched the metal and could see Rick raising his thumb. That was all he needed to see. Taking one last deep breath, he clenched his teeth, turned, and started descending into the dark and ominous hole. People kept watching him until his head disappeared below and Kevin turned on the headlamp with a single touch. It only illuminated the wall of the hole in front of his face, almost blinded him while he descended the ladder rung after rung. He could feel cold air brushing past him, far cooler than the outside up there, almost freezing it felt like. It was strange, going down into a hole like that, especially since he knew what he was looking for. An artifact of immense power and danger. Ice-cold chills seemed to creep under his jacket and tickled his skin. This was something else he had been warned about. Those fluctuations in temperature were caused by the book. It was real, and soon would be his. The sounds of him stepping onto the rungs rang hollow in his ears. He could feel the tension mounting. Sunlight was only visible high up above, while the darkness down here seemed to grow with every step. It felt like hours had passed before his foot finally found solid ground again, and his clammy fingers could release the ladder. Kevin looked up once again, at the sunshine outside the hole, then turned around and began scanning the area. In the dirt on the other side, rough and uneven, he could see the spot the foreman must have meant. A small, rectangular part of the surface, slightly curved, but perfectly smooth. Kevin took his shovel and watched the light of the headlamp flicker as he stepped closer. Only now he realized that the sounds of people outside had stayed away. No one was talking, singing, or joking anymore. At least he couldn't hear it. Kevin raised the shovel and stabbed at the spot. He had thought he would feel resistance, that this dome that had formed around it would stop him as well. But as soon as the tip of the shovel touched the earth, it just crumbled away. Staring at the now completely black hole filled him with trepidation. It was like the light of his headlamp was avoiding it. Kevin had to take a deep breath and remind himself why he was there. This was his destiny, he told himself, and forced his knees to bend so that he could take a closer look. The hole remained just as black, and the darkness stayed impenetrable. In there, the book was waiting for him. He crawled forward until his hands could touch the edges of the hole. Ice-cold air streamed out of it, numbing his fingers and freezing his lips. Kevin could hear and feel his own racing heartbeat. He would need to reach in to get it out. Everything, from his instincts to his body, wanted him to turn and run. Tremors shook his fingers, hands, and arms. No, he whispered, and could see a cloud forming from his breath in the shaking light of the headlamp. His destiny, he repeated in his mind. Kevin could hear something that sounded like a soft creaking coming from the hole, and suddenly froze in place. It was faint at first, but gaining volume with every passing moment. The sound of dry leather scraping over hard-packed dirt. Something was moving in there. The light from his headlamp was still shaking violently as his body stayed there, frozen in place. It wants to be found, he whispered. But the sound's getting louder. He could feel his chest tightening. He wouldn't be able to escape, his instinct screamed at him. Whatever was down here with him had woken up already. Kevin shook his head, then suddenly almost shrieked as he caught the first flicker of something moving in the darkness of the hole. It was almost a beige color. Black skin. His hand shot out on its own and dove into the darkness while his mind still recoiled in horror. It wants to be found, a voice repeated, this time coming from outside his head. He could feel something beneath the tips of his fingers. Rough cloth. His hand snapped shut around it and pulled back. Kevin could see something rectangular coming out of the hole, then a second hand, pale as death, and dried to a husk, flickering before it disappeared again. He was shaking, falling backward, but the spell was broken. Clasping the object tightly to his chest, he turned and ran for the ladder as the ground around him began to shake and move. With one hand, he grabbed hold of a rung, pulled himself up, and started racing up the steps. He felt cold and hot, deathly afraid and overjoyed at once. His mind was in turmoil. He thought he could hear the thing down there laughing, while roots and stones broke all around him. Faster! Kevin screamed at himself as he pulled his body upward and kicked the rungs with all his might. The light above would be disappearing soon. He could feel small clumps of dirt raining down on him and tried to speed up even more. The rungs felt slippery and the whole ladder was shaking. It was collapsing. Whatever had held the hole in place had now disappeared. If he didn't speed up, he would be buried alive. Kevin could see the light getting closer, while more and bigger clumps of dirt started to rain down on him. Something hard and sharp scratched his cheek. He could feel the ladder wobbling and shaking. A scream escaped his mouth as he saw a big piece of the earth up top moving, tilting and sliding. It would pull him down again. Something screamed in his mind. Kevin cried out as the shower of dirt began. Then suddenly, 3 hands appeared, grabbed hold of his shoulders and arm and yanked him upward. With a deafening rumble, the wall of the hole came loose and started sliding inward as the men pulled him up and out of the chaos. He could hardly follow what was happening. Somehow light flooded in as he rolled over the dirty ground, still clutching the book to his chest, and loud voices sprang up all around him. Tremors were running through the ground below, But as he opened his eyes, he could see even more strange faces and felt people pulling and dragging him away. The light above flickered while the voices ebbed and rose. He could feel strange emotions bubbling up in him. Fear and anger and despair. They carried him along, but as he opened his eyes fully, all he could see was Rick's face looking down at him.
Ready to wake up? You've been out for hours,
he heard his benefactor say, with this strange expression on his face. Kevin shot up in bed and looked around. This was his tent, his cot he was lying on, but Rick sat next to him on one of the camping chairs.
I told the crew to start the party without us. You've been tossing and turning bad enough that I almost called in the rescue team. Man, I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. What the hell happened down there?
Kevin could feel pain in his dried-out throat as he tried to answer, but only one sentence came over his lips.
Book. Where's the book?
Rick was looking at him bewildered, pointed straight at him at his midsection, and as he followed the finger, he realized that he was still holding onto the rectangular object, pressing it tightly against his stomach.
I think you need to calm down, man. Relax a little. Join me and the crew. We're gonna celebrate that no one was hurt.
Kevin was shaking his head immediately. He had it in his grasp. The object. His desire.
I'll come by later.
Go ahead. I need to, His voice sounded rough and hollow in his own ears, but Rick simply smiled at him, patted his shoulder, and then stood up.
If you're not with us in half an hour, I'll come and drag you out of here myself. Okay?
Kevin nodded again and waited for the man to leave his tent. He didn't care about anything at all, not as long as he finally had this book in his grasp. Seconds passed and dragged on while he listened to his benefactor's footsteps. He needed to wait, it told him, until he was truly alone again. His hands were shaking, and his heartbeat was racing. The footsteps finally left him, and with a sigh of relief, Kevin pulled the book away from his chest. It was far plainer than he had imagined. Bound in off-white linen. He slowly turned it in his hands. It looked normal, inconspicuous. A white book with a linen cover, like so many others from that time period. The only thing that stood out was the title engraved in its front. Martyr Maleficarum. The letters looked like blood against a white backdrop. Kevin put it on his lap and opened it down the middle. His fingers were shaking as he saw the first pages. They were empty. What? He started flicking through the pages. Empty. All of them. Panic began to set in. Every single page was the same. Off-white, with nothing written on it. Was that a joke? Kevin could hear laughter coming from outside. People were singing, and slowly, music was building. This couldn't be. It couldn't be empty. His fingers turned to the next page while rage and despair built in his chest. All of it. Was it all just a wasted effort? A fake book to shake off the Inquisition? Kevin could feel tears shooting into his eyes. But everything about it felt real. His fingers touched the first page, as empty and void as the rest, as he growled in anger. The laughter out there, the music, it sounded like they were mocking him, making fun of his life's work. He wanted to. Kevin felt a trembling running through the page and into his finger. The anger, the rage. It seemed to flow into the book, and when nothing had been written, suddenly words appeared, as black as the darkest ink. One word stood atop the page. Vindicta. Revenge. He could see smaller text appearing below, and his eyes started following them. Kevin felt his lips moving, the words only a whispered hush, yet brimming with some ancient power. Finally, he understood. It only showed you what you wanted. Could never be read in its entirety. The pages, copied from the book, would have appeared and disappeared on their own, so no one could find them apart from who would want them. His lips formed the last word of the paragraph. Inferno. And suddenly, a cruel and cold wind pulled at the walls of the tent. Kevin could feel it. Things moving outside in the wind. Dark, malicious things. Heading for the noise of music. He couldn't stop it. And deep down, didn't want to. This was it, he told himself. His life's work. The resurrection of a book that had once sought to rival the power of this continent's combined religious might. Kevin grinned as he felt a cold embrace. Light flickered all around him, and the joyous laughter suddenly turned into death-filled screams.